Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
The Nanosecond podcast is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing rock and adult contemporary top 40 hits from the 60s through the 90s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River.
Welcome to the Nanosecond podcast. With your hosts, Erik Nannarone, Nick Gaglione, and Pat Morrow. Interesting topics, intriguing conversation, and entertainment. Erik, Nick, and Pat will be right with you.
Hello and welcome to the Nanosecond podcast. I'm Erik.
And I'm Pat. And boy, do we have a guest for you.
Oh, yes. Do you want to do the intro, Pat?
Oh, I can do that. We got one of the best daytime listening sports talk show hosts I've ever listened to. He's right up there with the Riz. He's right up there with Carmen with Carmen. He's right up there with all of them, buddy. A warm and very, very, very. Let me get my sound effect here so I can do this right. All right, where'd it go?
Now the fun of Pat trying to find a sound effect.
This doesn't happen to me very often, but I've rearranged things. Where'd it go?
Yeah, okay.
All right, there it is. All right, a very warm welcome to Mr. Matt Fontana. Right? I got that right. Welcome, Matt. Good to see you.
Thanks, Pat. I'm clipping that. Send me that clip so I can send it to my bosses on my next contract discussion, my annual review, because I'm using that as leverage. Okay, I appreciate that.
Well, we'll take and send you the link to the show.
Thank you very much.
You can show them the whole thing. Great to have you, man. Great to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
I've been a long time listener. Probably since I used to listen to Rizzo all the time, and then you guys came on in the afternoons, and I used to drive for a living. I used to drive a route from Strongsville out through Boardman, and it was about an 8-hour drive, 200 miles, and you were part of that 200 miles usually. So it was.
Well, I appreciate that, Pat, because a lot of people I always say that one of the best compliments I could ever get is when somebody says I make their drive just a little bit shorter, whether they have a 20-minute commute home, whether you're in the car for 8 hours, like you said. If I can make it just a little bit shorter, that's one of the best compliments I get. So I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It really is. Let's get down to some brass tacks here. See my new shirt.
Wait, before we get to Cleveland sports, I want to just continue kind of what we were talking about off the air with the WWE. So what do you think, just tell the listeners what you think about the company that owns the UFC buying the WWE?
Yeah, I mean, Erik, I'm a bigger UFC fan than I am a WWE fan. So I think when I look at it, a lot of people wanted to try to connect dots to say, okay, maybe this is the path for more UFC people to go to the WWE, a la Ronda Rousey. Certainly Brock Lesnar started in the WWE, then came over to the UFC. And I don't know. I think it's probably more when you have a property like that available for sale for the first time in how long, since Vince McMahon bought it. I think that's probably more the reason. I do think they go hand in hand more than maybe other sports do to kind of build this portfolio out to say that you've got, WWE, professional wrestling, and then you've got the UFC. I think it's just the power of that. Certainly, I think there's a merge to be had. There's certainly marketing. There's already a lot of UFC fans that watch WWE. There's a lot of WWE superstars that you see cage side for a lot of UFC fights. So I'm excited. I think it's good. I again, coming more from the UFC side, I don't think there's any way that this harms it. Yeah, could we see maybe more of the UFC people that want to make that jump to WWE? Very possibly. But I think it's good, and I'm very interested to see kind of where they go from here. But I do think I think for at least to start, they'll try to keep things a little separate, just kind of let things keep running the way that they are.
Yeah, I would tend to agree there. Pat, go ahead with your first question. I just wanted to kind of get that.
That's all right. You can continue, whatever. As you can probably tell from my shirt, maybe next year.
It's always next year, right?
I'm a diehard Browns fan. Have been, always will be. I live and breathe the regular season. I've seen some of the changes that they've made, and was completely behind the coaching changes they've made. I was preaching that almost a year in advance that they needed to dump those two. What do you think? What do you see as far as what's going to happen with the Browns this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think those coaching changes really kind of stem from Kevin Stefanski knows that this has to be the year. This is going to be a really pivotal year for him. I'm a fan of Kevin Stefanski. I think he's a good coach. I think he can be the coach to take this team where they want to go. But this has to be a prove-it year. He's going into the fourth year here. Finally have Deshaun Watson here. They're going to have the full offseason. But there were some things that need to be shored up. I thought Joe Woods was going to come back. I really did. Because there were some player issues, no doubt. There was just mistakes that I didn't think necessarily reflected on coaching. But when Kevin Stefanski's entering such a pivotal year, you have to have everything buttoned up. You just have to make sure that everything's on the right. And Jim Schwartz is a very good defensive coordinator. I think people want to try to connect the dots of he could take this team over. I could tell you, I don't see that. I don't, at least that being a reason why he came here. I really think it was more of he's the right guy for this job. The wide nine is very attractive to try to get Myles Garrett in the best position. They certainly shored up that defensive line in a great way, added some nice pieces. I just think they saw an opportunity to shore up a position, a defense coordinator that they needed to have done. Mike Prefer was also a little shocking because of how just the relationship that Kevin Stefanski had with him for so long. And special teams coordinators, they're not, I mean, again, I know people would tell you they're 1/3 of the game with special teams, but it's not offensive defensive coordinator. When it comes to Cade York missing kicks, that's not necessarily a reflection on the special teams coordinator. I talked to Cade York the locker cleanout day. There were a lot of questions about his missed kicks or this and that. And he said, I know what I need to do. It's not that the special teams coordinator can't help him or can't point something out, but it's more at that point the kicker. So then what does the special teams coordinator do? We're talking kickoff returns. We're talking punt coverage. And those were some things that people had just glaring issues with as it continued to fall. And the same thing. Yes, were they maybe looking to make a move? Sure. But you bring in Bubba Ventrone, who was very sought after. Indianapolis did not want to lose him. He comes back to Cleveland where he played. And I just look at the hires I always say, if people want somebody fired, sure, I understand that. But who are you going to replace him with? You want a player cut? Okay, that's fine. Who are you going to replace him with? And I do think the Browns went out and got two of the very best options as replacements in Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone, just to shore those up. And that's the thing. This year's got to be it. This year has got to be perfect. This year has got to be a playoff run for the Browns. And if they saw deficiencies on defense, which were pretty glaring and obvious, and they saw some deficiencies in special teams, that's where the changes needed to be made.
Well, I had, like I said, the thing that really set me off about the two coaches during the season, especially once you got into the third and fourth game, you saw a lackadaisical attitude pop in there, and that I sit and analyze a lot of times. I'll sit and analyze what the defense is doing to see, why this game is going in this direction, and the missed tackles and the laziness and stuff, and you could just see the attitude wasn't there. And that's why I'd been preaching for Hill to go for like a year and a half, because he couldn't get that attitude changed. And it was the same thing with Prefer. Now with Swartz in there, and with Bubba Ventrone, who I just love. I liked him when he played, and the fact that he had the second or third ranked special teams in the league. I just love the idea of that. plus what they've picked up is just fantastic. It's going to be a 10 times better defense. Not sure what the offense is going to do, especially with the fact that they lost that receiver to
Torn Achilles, Michael Woods. Yeah.
torn Achilles. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of sad. But next man up. What's got to be? Eric, you want to?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think on the receivers too, you bring in Elijah Moore. I think Marquise Goodwin is a great sign, low risk, and he's going to kind of maybe take that over a little bit. I was talking about this week as well. Like I think this receiving group, like this core of receivers, might be one of the better ones the Browns have had in, I don't know, a decade. And that's tough to say because you had Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham at one point, on this team, but we all know how that kind of played out. But you look at what this team should be with Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, now with Elijah Moore, just those three. Those are three pretty top flight wide receivers.
The fact that they brought Dobbs back too, kind of, I liked him when he played in the preseasons and that. I thought he was going to be decent. I also thought they'd keep him, but for them to trade him off and then bring him back, I think that was a good move.
I thought he should have been the backup last year. I think he should have been, from how he played versus how Brissett played in the preseason, I thought Dobbs should have been the backup quarterback or starting quarterback for the time Watson was out.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because they also had Kellen Mond that was inactive for a lot of the season. And with Brissett, I mean, they wanted to respect him, obviously, with how well he had played and let him finish out the year. So somebody had to go. Obviously, because they brought him back, I would have told you that Josh Dobbs was very well respected in that locker room. He was very well respected by the football people. And it was just kind of a numbers thing. And then, you see him going there for Tennessee and I thought played okay, in a playoff game to try to, or not a playoff game, but to try to get them there. And, that position is important. I think if you lose your franchise quarterback, usually you're in a real pickle, but you see what San Francisco had to go through this past year. You've seen stories in the past where, Matt Castle comes out of nowhere to start a year for Tom Brady and lights the world on fire. So that position is important. And I also think when it comes to Stefanski, we talked about this season about how important it is. If Deshaun Watson goes down, I don't think that stops the evaluation. That doesn't stop the evaluation of what you need this year. So you need a guy that you feel comfortable to go in there and have to start games. And they really like Dobbs. They really did. Kellen Mond is still on the team. Be interested to see kind of how that battle goes throughout training camp. I'm assuming it'll be Dobbs' job to be that backup. But they're in good hands, I think, with Josh Dobbs being your backup.
Have you seen the rankings by Pro Football Focus yet?
I heard Riz talking about them this morning. Yeah, they were pretty interesting.
Yeah, the Browns were ranked 21.
Which I think, and it's funny because it all comes back to how much you subscribe to PFF, right? I like Pro Football Focus. I do look at it often, but it's not Bible. It's not something that you look at and you instantly look at stats and you know that player is that player. People like it because it's a tangible thing to grade. When people are watching film or when general managers or coaches are watching it, how do the average person, how do I quantify that? When you hear that a receiver has a good game, well, yeah, you go, it's 7 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a really good game. How do you know a corner had a good game? Okay, just interceptions. How did a D lineman have a good game? Well, was it just tackles or sacks? So I like it for the tangible reason for that. With the rankings, I didn't buy it because we should be one of the teams that PFF loves. We have PFF guys all across that offensive line that put up amazing numbers. Nick Chubb is a PFF stud. I think they might be going more off of like what Deshaun Watson did in his 6 games, which I think is, probably can't do that. You have to look at a bigger sample size. But I did think that was low just because PFF wise, I wasn't asking for top 10. I think that might have been too much, but I thought 21 was a little too low.
Going off the field, what do you think about the idea of a dome stadium?
I mean, I was against it, from the standpoint of as a fan, I enjoyed going down there in the bad weather. That being said, I know that the right thing to do for the city, for the Haslams, and for our very own economy is to have a dome to get all those other events that we know will come here. So I I never put up a fight. Like if they came out today and they said they were going to put a dome stadium on it, I would say, I understand that. The fact is that right now there's reports that they aren't planning on doing that. Um, it sucks because I do know there are people that are very upset just from an economic standpoint on what it could mean for our city. So I do see both sides of it. I think the toughest thing is for a dome stadium. I've heard things that they could build basically like a something to go over top of the stadium. They really can't actually like put a stadium on or a dome on the stadium. So that would, and at that point, why not just tear down the stadium and build a completely brand new one? Fine. But where are they going to go play for a year? Columbus is too far. It's not like when Minnesota, the Vikings were building theirs and they could go to the University of Minnesota, which was 10 minutes away. Fawcett Stadium in Canton is just, or Tom Benson at the Hall of Fame. That stadium is, I don't think, enough to play your regular season games there. I think there's just too many logistics. So right now they're just going to have to move on renovating the stadium as it is. And at this point, I'd be shocked if they did put a dome on it.
I mean, and people are complaining about like the syntax or whatever.
Sure.
What people don't realize is if they wanted to, they could use betting pool tabs. Like they could get
Yeah, you got gambling now. You could pay with it.
Yeah.
Pay for it with that.
That's what Minnesota did.
Yeah, I mean the tough thing is I think it was so hard to even get the gambling legislation passed that to muddy that down any worse would have been hard. I'm the same way. Like I don't think the syntax is a bad idea, and there are people that I live in the city of Cleveland. Like I pay city of Cleveland taxes. Like when they go build that stadium, that'll be part of my tax dollars. But I also grew up that my dad was in the plumbers union for 40 years and he worked on that stadium. So part of that money that helped my family growing up, giving my dad work was going to work on that stadium. So the same thing. I think about people that I know that own restaurants, or if you're a hotel or they want to go build something brand new, they want to give some of that money to the metro parks. Well, that's where if they put a dome stadium on there, money could come into the economy and help. Like people, and I think you guys feel the same way I do. It's scratching each other's back here. Yes, it sucks that money is coming out, and it does fall on the people of Cleveland. But hopefully it'll help them or help us one day coming back with events or money or tax breaks or new programs or whatever it could be.
The only thing that really scares me about a dome stadium like that they've mentioned would be you'd have to go to a different type of turf, and
Sure.
it seems like they get injury prone when that happens. If they could do something where they could, have something open to where they could keep the regular turf there, that would have to be a savings there. That would be the only thing I would see would be a drawback from having a dome over that thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because today there was a story that a player is filing a lawsuit against, I believe, SoFi Stadium for their turf because he got hurt on it. And that's certainly a big part of it. The NFL keeps coming out and trying to say that the stats aren't that different from injuries from natural grass versus turf. But you talk to any player, they tell you they'd rather play on grass. I'm the same way. Like I prefer football to be played on grass. The retractable roof would be the one that would probably be the one that it helps everybody, right? Because then you could have it open some days, you could have it closed some days. But at that point, yeah, I don't know if they'd be able to keep the grass or not.
Yeah, I as far as from what I've seen around the league and that, I think I'd much prefer I like the grass, but there again on the other side, if you put a dome stadium on that thing, you could open that thing up to 40, 50, 60 events a year,
Sure.
And that would be a major income for the city. But
I mean, you get a Super Bowl. I think if you did that's a minimum of one. I wouldn't put it much past the one, but if you build a new stadium, they're going to come with the Super Bowl. You would get a Final Four. You get WrestleMania. You'd have all these other things that could come. I mean, they do summer concerts there, and I don't know how many stadium concerts come to Cleveland in January and February and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's no way that they wouldn't have more events. There's just no way that they wouldn't have more events with the
Yeah.
Dome Stadium.
Going back to about a month ago when the players' union grades for the teams came out, do you think they're going to do substantial updates to their practice facility?
I do, Eric, and I look at it because the Haslams have, since they've really taken over the team, that they, unfortunately, when it comes to coaches and players, they don't spare expense. Like they've paid a lot of coaches, but also that does apply to the team, the facilities, what they're doing, the stadium. But I'm out in Berea a lot, and when they took it over, at the time it was brand new, right back in 1999, and the Haslams take it over in 2012, 2013. And it needed some updates, and they've already done that. They have expanded out some of the hydrotherapy areas. They've added a pool, a cold tub. They've had crowd therapy. But to the report that you're talking about, yeah, the players, even as a media member, I know it's not big enough. And I'm not a player. I just see where the weight room is. It's taking up half the field in the field house. They need to kind of refigure maybe some of the fields, and they will. They will. I have the utmost confidence that I think right now it's a little bit of a waiting game. They need some property to become available. I've talked to people out there that have an idea of what their grand idea is. It's big. It's a lot of money. And I do think it'll come one day, which again is good because those are workers. Those are Northeast Ohio workers that they're paying to do construction and plumbing and drywall and electrical, and hopefully even more that they can add to employment, because they're employing people, from our city as well. But yeah, I there's going to be an expansion in Berea. I don't know when. Obviously, they're going to have to pay a bill for the stadium as well. But I do know expansion is a high topic of what they want to do out there in Berea.
It
Let's switch. Oh, go
it
ahead.
sure
Pat.
beats the heck out of what we had in 1999 and or 98 when Modell decided to leave.
I went to Baldwin Wallace, so we used to practice on what was their old fields and their old, like, they have this little tiny building at BW, and I know people remember back to Lakeland College when they would go out there for training camp. I mean, it's probably better than that, but again, for 2023, is it what's needed? No, but I think they're committed to improving it.
Well, I would like to see it improve. I don't know if I'd be behind tearing the thing down or not. The simple fact of it is, it's only a 25-year-old building.
Yeah.
But they rushed that.
Yeah, I mean, they might just expand out. Like, I've heard some things of just expanding and using the footprint that they have, but the biggest thing they need is more land, just because they're going to have to move some things around and, maybe build a new building. If they want to expand out that field house, they're going to have to move some of the other fields, and they still, want to have access. So the biggest thing is probably still getting some land, but I know they're working hard on that.
All right, Eric.
Let's switch to baseball a little bit. Starting off with, now that with this drama with Bally Sports, and that's going on, and the Dolans always say they don't have a ton of money to spend on the team, but they're saving money because it was a very team friendly deal with Bally's. So does that make it perception that the Dolans are lying to the public or fan base?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Dolans are just such a polarizing figure in town because people do want them to spend more. And baseball is a sport where you can outspend your mistakes, and the big owners are handing out, hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts. I've always been one that I understood, and I was never one to tell people that they were wrong for feeling how they feel. But the reality was that they weren't the billionaires, billionaire people that own some of these other teams, and they just had to run it a little bit differently. Now, with David Blitzer coming in as the minority owner, maybe eventually one day the majority owner, things might change. Yeah, they do have that money coming in from Bally. Certainly, they have a lot of their own issues going on right now, trying to figure out what their future is going to be. Guardians always are solid when it comes to per capita as far as people viewing them, but attendance, any baseball owner would tell you you'd rather have people in the stadium spending money on concessions and paying for parking. You're paying more for tickets. So the biggest thing that any owner would always look at is revenue from attendance. And then on top of, yes, TV deals and some of that kind of other stuff. But they just always had to do a little bit different. I think with the contract they handed out to Andres Jimenez shows maybe there is a little bit of a change coming, whether that is David Blitzer's money or they did find a little bit more to spend. But I think brighter days are ahead. Again, I understood people's frustration with the Dolans. At times, I maybe even defended them to just try to say this is how they had to do it. People said, okay, we'll go sell the team then. Might be getting their wish in the future on that. We'll have to see.
Sorry, I was about to ask something and I drew a blank.
It happens to all of us.
If you, as far as the Dolans go.
Oh, wait, before we go, we should probably, for anybody just tuning in, we are talking to Matt Fontana, host of ESPN Cleveland Tonight on 850 WKNR. Go ahead, Pat.
And how do you like the way I've trained this guy, Matt?
That's very good.
I trained him to do that stuff.
Good. I got a boss that tells me the same thing: reset your guests all the time. So I'm right there.
A lot of times I'll send him a message over Twitter that'll say, "Time to ID."
Right, ID always important, always vitally important.
Doggone right. But as far as the Dolans go, I've always thought that they sit on their wallet a lot, and I think that they could probably do better. They're not going to outdo New York as far as a payroll or anything like that.
Right.
Let's face that. But I've always thought that they could do better. The fact that they've got the youngest team probably or close to the youngest team in the in professional baseball, and you've got at least 4 or 5 more years of greatness there. I can't wait to see the next year or two. And this is going to be something else to watch. And do you think we could get to a World Series, and let alone win it?
Yeah, I do. I really do, because the pitching staff, as we know, has usually been the bread and butter. But this is the first time in a long time, Pat, that I think the lineup is as close to the pitching staff as it's been. We've been years that we've been extremely heavy on one side or the other. I think this lineup, yes, Josh Bell's off to a slow start. Mike Zunino coming around a little bit, but the 1 through 6, and even if you have Jimenez batting in the 7 hole from time to time, it's up there. Is it the 90s when you had Manny Ramirez and Jim Thome batting, 6th and 7th? Not necessarily, but this is still a better lineup than they've put out there. And I think it's interesting to see what Terry can do with that, with those pieces, because he's managed the hell out of this team without having as many good pieces as he's had. I want to see what he can do now with a team. And we know when they built it up to make that run in 2016. He knows how to get there. He knows how to manage it. You just need the right players. But that's reminiscent, right? You have good starting pitching. You have a shutdown bullpen like they did in 2016. And you've got 3 or 4, maybe even 5 guys in that lineup that you really trust to be able to produce. So, I would tell you, Pat, I think if they don't get to a World Series in the next 5 years, people would say that's a disappointment. They would.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
Which conference or league, American League or National League, would you say is stronger? Because with other sports, everybody says the Eastern Conference or the AFC in football is stronger. So which out of baseball, which conference or league do you think is stronger?
My gut initially my gut was going to say the National League. It just was, because I think both Central divisions, the AL Central and the NL Central, probably the Cardinals and the Brewers are the favorites. Cardinals are a little ahead of the Brewers in the odds to win the Central. Guardians are the favorite to win the Central. So we'll take them out for a second. But you look at the AL East, right? Okay, so you've got New York and Tampa and Toronto that expect to be playoff contenders. Then you compare that to the Mets, to the Braves, who are both up there to win the World Series, and then the Phillies are there. They've obviously battled some really bad injuries. So in that, close maybe the AL. But then you go to the AL and NL West, and I like Seattle. Astros are the favorite to win it there. But I don't think either one of those teams, and especially with the Astros, if Altuve is going to be out, Verlander gone, I'm taking the Dodgers over them. And then if I fold the Padres into that, I would probably lean NL. I think it's close. And to your point earlier, Eric, you're right. I 1000% agree. The AFC is better than the NFC, and I agree the East is better than the West. So, but baseball is the closest. Like I'm going to lean NL, but I think it's a lot closer than basketball and football, which is what any sport would like to have. They want that balance, certainly. My gut leaned towards the NL, so I think I'm going to stick with the NL.
What do you think about the new that a team has to play every other team in baseball rule instead of playing your division rivals 18 times?
Yeah. I love it. I do because I think when you want to grow the sport the way that you want to, you have a young, grandson, granddaughter, son, daughter, niece, nephew, whatever, and they love Bryce Harper. Well, you'd have to wait 6 years to go see Bryce Harper or see Bryce Harper come to your town, or they do still love Francisco Lindor, who is here in Cleveland, right? You want to see him again. Well, now instead of waiting 5, 6, 7 years for them just to happen to come through, or you spend a lot of money to go to New York or Philadelphia, now you can wait 1 year and they're coming to town and you're going to have a 3-game series. And you assume, unlike basketball, who's got some of these load management problems, you assume that they're going to play in at least one of those games, if not all three, and you can see the stars. I love it. I think it was a great move. And yeah, we played too many division games as it was. I think this is one of my favorite things. I'm not a big Rob Manfred fan, but this is one of the few things that I think baseball has gotten right over the last couple of years.
You mentioned the load management, and switching to the NBA real quick. What do you think of the back-to-back games in one city?
I think it's an interesting concept to try to mitigate the load management because what they're saying is you don't have to travel in between. We can get these games in. And I think the NBA is trying to extend that olive branch out to the players to say, yeah, we want you to play more. The problem is I don't think it's ever going to stop. I don't think these big players, when teams have goals to go win a championship, the regular season doesn't mean anything to them. So it's going to be hard to stop that. And then how do you tell a player to go play when they're nursing a sore ankle or a sore knee? I don't think there's any way the NBA can try to slow that down. I think the home and home series are interesting. I'd be open to more of those for sure moving forward, especially if you could knock it out like on the West Coast. If you could, and again, West Coast is different, talking about East Coast versus West Coast, because you just play them once at home and once there, but try to find different ways to mix that in, I think is a good call.
Okay. Non-sports topic. I thought it would be kind of fun because actually this was a topic on your show yesterday. Soft tacos or hard tacos?
Soft tacos all the way. Hard tacos aren't good. You bite into a hard taco and it just crumbles and it falls apart.
Yes.
Soft tacos all day. We had tacos last night for dinner. There was not a hard shell to be had in the house. It was soft tacos all the way.
Who's got the best taco?
Ooh, I do like Barrio. I do like a place called Avo on West 25th. I like Canado. We've gone to a place called Cilantro Taqueria there in Lakewood, which is very good. I've had people tell me about La Plaza before in town on the west side. So there's a lot of good taco places for sure. If I had to pick one, it'd probably be Avo or Barrio.
That sounds interesting. I can't think of really any around me right at the moment.
Oh, you got
about the worst we got to Taco Bell. We do have this place called La Limona, and it's a little Mexican. It's run by Mexicans, and you can tell it by just the outside of the place.
Authentic, yeah, it's the way.
And it's very authentic. Mm-hmm. Probably the best ones. Now that I think of it, there's 2 or 3 of them around here.
Yeah.
But I like Mexican food, but it doesn't usually like me.
Fair enough.
So, moving on.
I gotta make a quick comment here. I love your background pictures.
Oh, thanks. I'm just in the office actually. It's Myles Garrett and Darius Garland.
I've got
moved to one side and the other, but
yeah. I've got the oh crap. Hang on a second. Go ahead and take it over.
Okay. So another non-sports, but anyway, favorite Adult Swim / Fox Sunday night lineup show between King of the Hill, Simpsons, Family Guy, or Bob's Burgers? And why?
Probably could have stopped with Family or with King of the Hill. Family Guy would be second, but I love King of the Hill. So that's definitely would be my answer. I'm glad to see it's coming back. I'm pretty interested to see what it's going to look like on the return of King of the Hill. But my brothers and I do definitely like Bobby Hill and Hank and the crew.
Welcome to live
I
radio.
never was a King of the Hill fan, but like a couple of my friends got me into it, like in the last like 6 months, and I watch it like every day.
Yeah,
So-
no, I like it's like anything. The early episodes are fine, but I think it got better as it went on. The my favorite episode is when they become volunteer firefighters and they burn down the firehouse. That one's it. Smitty the groundskeeper, the one where Hank's going to use the truck to move his I think his mother-in-law's furniture, his mom's furniture, and they all stow in the back. The one that Bobby goes hunting. I mean, there's so many good episodes.
The one he goes blind after walking in on his mom and stepdad.
Right, yeah, that one. Yeah,
That
Cotton.
one's good.
Yeah, Cotton is certainly a character. Lucky, because my brother loves Tom Petty too. So when they introduced Lucky, it was voiced by Tom Petty. That really just put it over the top for us.
Oh, I didn't know that he was.
I'm more of a
Oh,
South
that's
Park fan. Between
Sure,
South-
South Park. We did a bracket for the best TV show in history. South Park got a lot of votes, but unfortunately did not advance.
Wow,
Yeah.
that shows that's got the most adult topics I've ever seen, and any kind of a cartoon like that. It's, no wonder it's been around like it has. That and
been around a
between
long
that
time.
and the Simpsons.
Yeah. The Simpsons just never die. They're
Oh, no.
in season 34 now.
I remember.
So-
Hell, even your soap operas, some of those were around for 50 or more years.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how I could sit and watch something like that for 50 years.
I don't know. They keep coming up with topics for it. Like that's over 50 years or over 30 odd some years to keep coming up with stuff. I don't think I could do it.
And it's so weird how they like predict stuff too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty famous thing, I think, with The Simpsons, right? That they predicted
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff, or Family Guy predicted a bunch of stuff that would happen. So
Yeah.
We've actually done a couple of occult shows, I guess you'd call it, or conspiracy shows here.
oh
And
sure, yeah.
there's been 2 or 3 shows that we did that actually went into The Simpsons and went into the other places that predicted that stuff. You know, it's amazing that they've done that, and that the similarities of what actually happened as opposed to what they predicted was just dead on. You got to
Oh,
wonder
yeah.
how they do it.
Yeah, no,
Could-
they're
could
right.
be
Like you said, it's
Could be the
creative people.
Could be the Illuminati. Could
Well, it's getting to be that time.
let's hang in for
wrap it up.
a couple more
What?
seconds here. Let's hang in for a couple more seconds.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
Why don't you tell everybody how we can get a hold of you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt Fontana 83. I do have an Instagram. It's just Matt Fontana ESPN. And as always, find me 5 to 7 ECT every night on 850 ESPN Cleveland or the ESPN app. So we're on coming up this afternoon. Probably talk a little Cavs, talk a little Guardians, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, 5 to 7 pretty much every night. That's the easiest way.
I got to tell
And
you, we really
recently-
appreciate. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, recently you've been filling in on ESPN Radio also.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's been a cool experience. Definitely like to get that little just different vibe on how shows are done. And there's a clock I have to follow. I don't, if you listen to ECT, I don't break all the time when I'm supposed to. That doesn't really fly on the network. So that's a good learning experience for me for sure. And I've also got a chance to work with some really, really talented people, which has been awesome.
What's it like working with people that aren't like in the studio with you?
Yeah, I mean,
Does
it's
that
definitely tough. It takes like there's always this balance, but it's also working with people that some of them I've never worked with before. So it's getting that flow and that vibe, or what do they like to talk about, or kind of what's their cadence. So it's definitely been a learning experience for sure. But yeah, there's definitely a challenge of not having somebody in the room, to kind of feed off and vibe with.
With that, Pat, do you have any more questions?
I don't think so. I I do want to say thank you for joining us and breaking yourself away from your sick child there. It is
no,
greatly appreciated.
I had to come into work eventually, so I was like, "Oh, sorry, honey, I gotta go." My wife was at work, and our son had to stay home sick from school today, so I was like, sorry, I had to go to work anyway." But no, I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a lot of fun.
And you're always welcome back.
Thank you.
We've been around for about 3.5 years now. This show's renamed about 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we stay the same, and we enjoy the guests that we have on here. Erik's a hell of a guest finder.
Yep.
And I do appreciate that. So anyway, I'll turn it over to him to end it up here. I will
Thanks again, Matt.
I will say one last thing.
You guys got my info. Always reach out. I'm always here for you guys.
Okay.
Stay aware of the weather today. Stay aware.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Everybody stay dry out there.
With that, as the saying goes, it's time to be like a hockey player and get the puck out of here.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Pittsburgh! Pittsburgh sucks!